My name is Dr. Arthur Bishop. For 15 years, I was the Deputy Chief Medical Examiner for Cuyahoga County. My world was one of stainless steel, chemical solvents, and the immutable logic of human biology. I was a man of evidence. If I couldn't weigh it, measure it, or see it under a microscope, it simply didn't exist. The body tells the story, I always said. Every time. It cannot lie. My confidence, my entire reality was built on this premise. It was a sturdy house of brick and mortar, built on a foundation of empirical fact. That house is now in ruins. I am writing this not as a medical professional, but as a warning. The body tells the story, yes, but I was wrong about the author. It began subtly, as these things always do, not with a bang, but with a discrepancy, a file. I called it, with a cynical sort of gallows humor, the Illogical Six. It was a private file, locked in my desk drawer, a collection of cases that defied the tidy narratives of my profession. Case number 1 was a man who had, by all appearances, spontaneously combusted in a damp, unheated apartment. Case number 2 was a woman found in her locked bedroom, her bones shattered as if from a multi-story fall, yet her skin was unbroken. Case number 3, a college student who died of massive cardiac arrest, pure terror, in a room with no apparent threat. Number 4 and number 5 were desiccated bodies, mummified, found in the wettest parts of the Cleveland sewer system. They were anomalies, flukes, statistical outliers that I rationalized as undiagnosed pathologies or incomplete evidence. They were the grit in the gears of my perfect logical machine. I obsessed over them in private, my skepticism a shield against the creeping unease they inspired. Then came case number 6. He was a John Doe, pulled from the husk of the old Packard plant off Euclid Avenue. Detective Mike Harrigan, a pragmatic slab of Irish-American cop who I'd shared more stale coffee with than I cared to remember, was already baffled. "Art," he said, pulling back the sheet in Bay 3. The smell of ozone and damp concrete rolled off the body. "Tell me what you make of this." I made nothing of it. The man was in his late 20s, but his skin was like powdered asbestos, gray, brittle, and ancient. His eyes were wide, the sclera yellowed and cracked like old porcelain. He was desiccated, much like cases number 4 and number 5, but there was something else. A profound, unnatural cold radiated from him. The thermostat in the bay read 70 degrees, but I could see my breath fogging over his chest. "Vitals?" I asked, my voice already tight. "Time of death estimated 2 hours ago," Harrigan said, flipping his notebook. "Patrol found him stiff, but look at him, Art. He looks like he's been dead for 50 years. I leaned in, my gloved fingers tracing the topography of his face. The skin flaked away under my touch. Lividity is fixed, but the desiccation is accelerated, massively. Toxicology will tell us more. Maybe some kind of chemical exposure, industrial solvents. In a building that's been empty since '82? Harrigan shrugged. He wasn't a vagrant. Clothes are clean, no needle marks. I began my external examination. That's when I found it. Clutched so tightly in his right hand that I had to break the fingers to retrieve it was a small object. It was a chip of black volcanic glass, obsidian. It wasn't the glass itself that struck me, it was the temperature. Even through my glove, the cold was immediate and painful, like touching dry ice. I dropped it instinctively onto the steel tray, where it skittered to a stop. "What the hell is that?" Harrigan asked. "Volcanic glass," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Doesn't belong in a Cleveland factory." I bagged it, but a strange thing happened. The moment it was sealed in the plastic, a perfect crystalline lattice of frost bloomed on the outside of the bag. In a 70-degree room, Harrigan saw it. He looked at me, his face pale. "That's static electricity, right?" "Right," I lied. "Static." I worked late, my initial skepticism warring with a primal fear I hadn't felt since childhood. I ran the tox screen. Negative. No solvents, no poisons, no exotic diseases. I checked his internal organs. They were dry, brittle, as if every drop of moisture had been instantly vacuumed from his body. Cause of death was systemic cellular collapse, but the mechanism was impossible. That night I went home to my sterile modern apartment in Ohio City. I prided myself on its order. glass, steel, and neutral colors, a fortress of rationality. But that night, the fortress felt thin. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the obsidian shard, now locked in an evidence freezer at the morgue. I thought about the frost. Around 3 a.m., I heard a sound. It was a soft, scraping noise, like dry leaves being dragged across a concrete floor. I sat up in bed. My apartment was on the 12th floor. There were no trees. The sound came again, seeming to originate from the hallway just outside my door. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. I told myself it was the building settling, the elevator cables, wind in the chute. My heart hammered against my ribs, a traitor to my logical mind. I got up, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Fluorescent light hummed over the beige carpet. I leaned my ear against the door. Silence. Then, a sudden, piercing cold flooded through the wood, making me recoil. It felt exactly like the obsidian shard. I stumbled back, staring at the door, as a thin line of frost spiderwebbed out from the peephole. I watched, frozen myself, as the ice spread, cracked the lens, and then, as quickly as it came, vanished. I did not sleep. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, a man of science waiting for the sun to rise, telling myself I was overtired, that I was projecting the day's anomalies onto my environment. I was wrong. The incursion had begun. The second act of a man's descent into madness is not a sprint. It's a desperate crawl through the dark, scratching for answers while the darkness scratches back. My life became bifurcated. By day, I was Dr. Bishop, the consummate professional, deflecting questions from my colleague, Dr. Elena Ramirez, about my haggard appearance. "Arthur, you look terrible," she said, sipping her coffee, her skepticism a mirror of my own. "That John Doe get to you?" "Just a puzzle," I muttered. "I hate puzzles I can't solve." By night, I was a different man. I was a paranoid obsessive. The scraping sound returned every night, always outside my door, always accompanied by that flash of impossible cold. I stopped sleeping in my bedroom, camping out on the sofa, my locked file on the Illogical 6 open on the coffee table. The shield of my skepticism was cracking. I needed an answer, and my science wasn't providing one. The connection was the desiccation. Cases number 4, number 5, and number 6, and the cold. I re-examined the evidence from case number 3, the college student who died of fright. My notes said her fingernails were broken. Digging through the evidence bags, I found the scrapings I had taken from beneath them. Under the microscope, I found it. Not a chip, but a microscopic grain. Black, vitreous, obsidian, a pattern, a terrifying, irrational pattern. The locations, the factory, the sewer tunnels. I plotted them on a map of Cleveland. They formed a loose triangle, its center hovering over the old industrial heart of the city, the flats. My investigation became frantic. I abandoned my sterile labs for the musty confines of the Cleveland Public Library's archives. I wasn't a medical examiner anymore. I was a historian of the damned. I pulled city planning records, old newspapers on microfiche, anything I could find about that specific area of the flats from before the turn of the 20th century. For days I found nothing, just industrial records, shipping manifests, the mundane bedrock of a burgeoning city. I was about to give up, to concede to Elena that I was just overtired, when I found the reference. It was in a 1904 police blotter, a story buried on page 12. The summer chill, mystery as vagrants found frozen. I read with a mounting sickness. In July 1904, during a record-breaking heatwave, a dozen homeless men were found in a half-finished drainage culvert. They were, according to the reporter, frozen solid, their faces locked in expressions of profound terror. The police dismissed it as a bizarre weather phenomenon, or tainted liquor, but the report mentioned a name, Elias Thorne, the city health inspector, who had sealed the site. This led me to the city archives, a dusty basement room that smelled of acidic paper and forgotten time. Here, I met my herald, Mr. Abernathy, a man as dry and brittle as the files he curated. Thorne, Elias Thorne, Abernathy mumbled, peering at me over his spectacles. Odd request, Doctor. He was the inspector for the old viaduct project. Why would the ME's office care about 1904 infrastructure? I'm researching historical anomalies and causes of death, I lied. Abernathy gave me a long, unsettling look. Anomalies. Yes. He disappeared into the stacks and returned 20 minutes later, holding a single, moldering, leather-bound ledger. It was tied with twine. This isn't the official report, he whispered, placing it on the table. The official report just says, structural instability. This was found in his home after his suicide. We keep it here, uncatalogued. Suicide? Hanged himself in his attic. 2 weeks after sealing the viaduct, Abernathy said. He tapped the book. Some foundations are better left buried, Doctor. The men who built this city, they were in a hurry. They built on top of things they didn't understand. He walked away, leaving me alone with the book. It wasn't a report. It was a diary. Elias Thorne's handwriting was elegant, precise, the script of a rational man. But as the entries progressed, the writing devolved into a panicked, almost illegible scrawl. He described his job, inspecting the new, deep-level drainage tunnels being cut through the shale bedrock beneath the Cuyahoga River. October 17th, 1904. We broke through into a hollow place, not a cavern. It feels carved. The air is still and cold, impossibly cold. The foreman complained the lanterns flicker and die. I have ordered work halted until we can assess the air quality. October 19th, 1904. It is not the air. It is the rock. It is not shale. The walls are lined with a black, glassy stone I do not recognize. It feels like a tomb. The cold. It does not feel natural. It feels hungry. The men are terrified. They speak of shadows moving just beyond the light. October 21st, 1904. I saw it. God help me, I saw it. We ventured deeper. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber. The walls are all glass, and in the center, a vein. A great black vein of this obsidian, pulsing with a faint internal luminescence. It is not rock. It is a thing. It breathes. It breathes the heat from the air, from our bodies. October 22nd, 1904. 2 men are missing. We found only their clothes, frozen so brittle they shattered at a touch. I saw the thing. It has no shape. It is a ripple in the air, an absence of light and warmth. It is the color of the void. It moved toward us, and I felt my life being drawn out through my skin. A dry, scraping sound. It is the hunger that dries. It feeds on the spark. It leaves only the husk. October 24th, 1904. I have sealed the tunnel. Dynamite. I told the city it was a methane pocket. I lied. I have buried it. But I know it is not trapped. It is merely waiting. The glass, the black glass, it is its body, and its veins run everywhere beneath this city. God forgive me. I brought a piece home. A sample. I cannot get warm. The last page was a single frantic sentence, smeared by a trembling hand. It knows my name. It is scratching at the door. I slammed the book shut. My heart was a drum. The scraping sound, the cold, the John Doe's obsidian shard. I had brought a piece home. I hadn't just found an anomaly. I had invited it. I ran from the library, Abernathy's pitying gaze following me out. I drove to the morgue, a wild, desperate plan forming. I had to destroy the shard. I burst into the lab, ignoring Elena's startled call. I went to the evidence freezer. I typed in my code. Access denied. I typed it again. Denied. Arthur, what's going on? Elena was behind me. Open the freezer, Elena. My code's not working. Of course it's not, she said, her voice laced with a cold professionalism I hadn't heard before. Harrigan logged you out. You're on administrative leave, Arthur. Effective an hour ago. What? You can't. Elena, there's something in there I have to get. It's dangerous. What's dangerous, Arthur? A piece of rock? Harrigan told me about your entity theory, about the 1904 report. He's worried about you. I'm worried about you. You've been working too hard. You're hallucinating. Elena, You don't understand, I pleaded, grabbing her arm. The cold, the bodies, it's real. Thorn killed himself because it followed him. She pulled her arm away, her face a mask of clinical concern. Security is on their way to escort you out. Go home, Arthur. Sleep. We'll talk tomorrow. You don't get it, I whispered, backing away. Home is the last place I can go. I turned and ran. I fled the one place I had ever felt safe, the one place built on logic and fact. I was an outcast, a lunatic. I drove aimlessly, the sun setting, the shadows in my car lengthening, seeming to stretch toward me. It knew my name. And now, I had nowhere to go. I was locked out of my sanctuary of science and locked in with the object of my terror. My apartment, my beautiful, rational apartment, was waiting. It was a tomb, and the scratching had already begun. I sat in my car in the parking garage for hours, watching the temperature gauge on my dashboard. 8 p.m., 9 p.m. The concrete walls of the garage seemed to sweat, but I was cold. The isolation was absolute. Elena thought I was insane. Harrigan thought I was a liability. The two pillars of my professional life, the rationalists who had always anchored me, had cut the rope. There was no choice. All my research, my files, the goddamned ledger, it was all in my apartment. My apartment on the 12th floor, where it was waiting. When I finally stepped into the elevator, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the button. The ride up was a slow torment. The ding of the bell arriving at my floor sounded like a death knell. The hallway was silent, but the air was wrong. It was cold. I could see my breath. The beige carpet was stiff with frost. My front door, Unit 12B, was covered in a thick, feathery rime of ice. The metal numbers cracked and blackened. The scraping sound was no longer outside the door. It was coming from within. My key, slick with frost, finally turned the lock. The door swung open onto a scene from a polar nightmare. My apartment, my clean steel and glass apartment, was destroyed. Frost covered every surface. The windows were opaque, frozen shut from the inside. The drywall was cracked and swollen, the paint peeling in icy sheets. My furniture was shattered, the wood splintered as if by some incredible cold pressure. In the center of my living room, the source. It wasn't a monster. It wasn't a ghost. It was, as Thorne described, an absence, a shifting column of utter blackness, a void in the shape of a man that drank the light. It was pure, predatory cold. As I watched, it pulsed. With every pulse, a wave of cold rolled out, and the scraping sound filled the air, the sound of moisture being ripped from the very atoms of the room. It turned its attention to me. I couldn't see eyes, but I felt its gaze. It was a gaze of sterile, clinical hunger. The hunger that dries. I backed away, fumbling for the door, but it slammed shut with a concussive boom, the frame instantly freezing over. I was trapped. "What do you want?" I whispered, my words fogging and freezing in the air. It didn't answer. It drifted toward me, the carpet turning to gray dust beneath it. I ran, scrambling into my study, and slammed the door, locking it. I heard the lock click, and then the sickening crack as the metal froze and snapped. I was in my study. It was in my living room. I piled books against the door, my medical texts, my journals, the very symbols of my rationality, now a pathetic, physical barrier. The temperature in the study plummeted, -10, -20. I could feel the warmth being pulled from my skin. My breath was ragged, my fingers already numb. I looked around, desperate. How do you fight cold? Fire. I had a metal wastebasket and a stack of my files, the files on the illogical 6. With numb, clumsy fingers, I sparked a lighter. I lit the corner of case number 1, the spontaneous combustion. The paper caught, the flame weak and blue. The scraping on the other side of the door stopped. I added more files. Case number 2, case number 3. The fire grew, a pitiful orange glow. The wastebasket became a small, desperate beacon. For a moment, the temperature stabilized. I felt a surge of triumph. I was a man of science. Fire beats cold. Then, From under the door, the entity flowed. It wasn't a solid mass. It was a river of shadow, a flowing vacuum. It poured into the study, and the fire. The fire died. It didn't sputter. It was inhaled. The flames were drawn from the paper in bright orange ribbons and consumed, leaving only frozen, blackened ash. The entity reformed in the corner of my study, larger now, pulsing with the heat it had consumed. Despair, cold and absolute, settled over me. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't escape it. My curiosity had been the lure, the obsidian shard had been the hook, and my investigation had been the act of reeling it in. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall. My movements were sluggish. Hypothermia was setting in. My mind began to fracture. I saw the morgue. I saw Elena's face, pitying. I saw Harrigan, disgusted. I was going to be case number 7. Dr. Arthur Bishop, cause of death, systemic cellular collapse, mechanism, unknown. The entity drifted closer. The scraping sound was deafening, the sound of my life being erased. I could feel my skin tightening, the moisture in my eyes freezing. And then, I saw it, on my desk. The one thing I hadn't burned, Elias Thorne's leather-bound diary. It wasn't just a record, it was a connection. The entity had followed him because of his obsessive study. It had followed me for the same reason. It wasn't just hungry for heat, it was hungry for the attention. It was a thing of the dark that despised being known. I looked at the shadow. I looked at the book. It was a final, desperate gamble. A sacrifice. My body was failing. To move was agony. My thoughts were thick, slow, like oil freezing in an engine. The entity was only feet away, a towering void of cold that filled my study. It was savoring this, the slow drawing out of the spark. You followed him, I slurred, my jaw barely moving. The words came out as a frozen rasp. Thorne, you followed his observation. The thing paused. The scraping sound hitched, became inquisitive. You don't just want heat, I whispered, pushing myself up onto one elbow. The effort was Herculean. You want the record. You want to erase the fact that we know. I grabbed Thorne's diary. My frozen fingers couldn't grip it. I clawed it, dragging it across the desk and onto my lap. The entity recoiled. A hiss filled the room, not of air, but of the absence of sound. The cold intensified, a physical blow. It knew what I held. He studied you, I gasped, holding the book aloft. He wrote it all down. He saw you. I fumbled for the lighter. My thumb, a numb stump of flesh, wouldn't make it work. The entity surged forward. And I studied him, I screamed, the sound cracking in my throat. I studied all of them. The 6. I threw the lighter down. I didn't need fire. I needed the opposite. I was the ME. I was the final observer. You are a mechanism, I whispered, my voice finding a strange, cold strength. I stared into the void. You are a parasitic entropy. You feed on thermal energy, drawn to the electrical spark of consciousness that observes you. The obsidian is your conduit. You are not a demon. You are a phenomenon. I was performing my last and greatest autopsy. I was diagnosing the monster. The entity screamed. It was a soundless, psychic explosion that shattered the remaining glass in the room. The cold was a solid wall, but I wasn't dead. I looked down at my hands. They were blue-white. The skin was translucent. But as I watched, a spiderweb of frost crept from my own fingertips and onto the leather-bound cover of the diary. The entity stopped. It stared at my hand. I didn't just invite it. I didn't just observe it. In my desperate scientific obsession, I had learned it. I had rationalized it. And in doing so, I had created a space for it within my own logic. You can't have the book, I whispered, a terrible cold smile touching my frozen lips. Because I am the book. I clutched the diary to my chest. The entity lunged, not at me, but past me, its shadowy cold form striking the wall where my files had been, where my research had hung. It tore the room apart, shredding the evidence of its own existence, ripping the drywall from the studs, searching for the proof, for the observation. But it couldn't find it. because the observation wasn't on paper anymore. It was in me. It stopped. It turned. It regarded me. This new thing. This man of science who had become a vessel for the impossible. It saw the frost on my hands, the ice in my eyes. It saw a mirror, and then, with a slow, agonizing sound of tearing void, it retreated. It poured back out of the study, a torrent of shadow flowing back to the center of the living room. It didn't just leave, it receded, pulling the impossible cold with it. The windows shattered as the pressure equalized. The frost on the walls cracked, groaned, and fell away in great, wet chunks. The entity collapsed in on itself, shrinking to a pinprick of utter blackness. And then, it was gone. The silence that remained was heavy, wet, and filled with the smell of mildew and destroyed plaster. I was found 2 days later by Harrigan. The official report said a burst pipe on the 13th floor had flooded my apartment, simultaneously shorting out my HVAC system and trapping me. The severe localized frost was attributed to a freak atmospheric anomaly caused by the rapid depressurization. I was treated for severe hypothermia and exposure. I lost 2 toes on my left foot and the tips of 3 fingers on my right hand. I was, of course, fired. Medically unfit. Elena visits me sometimes. She brings me soup and looks at me with those same pitying clinical eyes. She thinks I'm broken by trauma, a man who saw too much death and finally snapped. I live in a small, assisted living apartment now. It's always warm. They keep the thermostat at 80 degrees just for me. My house of logic is in ruins. I am the survivor. But the scar is the knowledge. The survival was not a victory, it was a transaction. I am no longer a man of science. I am a relic. I am a warning. I am the witness. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the quiet, I hear it. A faint, dry scraping. Not from the hallway, not anymore. It comes from inside my own chest. I am Dr. Arthur Bishop. I am case number 7. And I am so very, very cold.